Welcome back to another episode of Tech for Thought, where we bring you the latest finance news, technology, and AI news. Last week, or no, not last week, we've been away for a little bit. We've just been busy. Our schedules um, haven't aligned. And today we're going to unpack well, last time we spoke, we unpacked the post-labor economy, UBI pilots, which is basically universal basic income, collapsing wage theory, and AI human hybrids. Now this week there's a lot of stuff going on, specifically in tech AI battlegrounds, the fight for talent. Most recently, I know that there was a $200 million contract given out to, I think it was a Meta employee that Meta gave to an OpenAI. I can't remember the name, but I mean, it's like it's getting to a point where it's almost like a contract, like a professional sports contract. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the corporate landscape. Google doing a lot of things as they usually do. OpenAI, also Cloudflare, they're drawing the line with how models are going to be trained. Essentially, they carry about 16% of all internet traffic. So, and now they're wanting to do some things in terms of limiting the way AI models scrape the internet and train their models on that. And so, also, Elon Musk is doing some crazy stuff as usual. But the first topic we're going to talk about today is Windsurf's dramatic talent split, where Google's kind of poaching talent from Windsurf. So Windsurf, a promising AI coding startup led by former DeepMind talent, became the focus of a wild weekend of high stakes moves from tech giants. So Google executed a $2.3 billion licensing and acquire hire deal, bringing in Windsurf's CEO Varun Mohan, as well as their co-founder Douglas Chen. And you can see a lot of things happening and unraveling with this contract that they're now, well, they were bidding, I believe OpenAI had a three billion dollar contract set, but that expired, and then Google came through with their 2.3 billion dollar offer. And so just days later, Cognition Labs, the company behind the AI coding agent Devin, acquired Windsurf's remaining assets, including the full stack platform, IP, brand, and 250-person team. So a lot of stuff unraveling here. Google's move wasn't a full acquisition, but we're seeing that they're bringing people from Windsurf onto their team to just maintain their global dominance. Like a lot of these tech companies, I mean, they have deep wallets, and you're seeing a lot of that come to fruition, especially now. So the first question is top AI talent now more valuable than the products themselves? Like, what do you guys think with all these contracts going out for all these great minds? What do you guys think it's going to lead to?
Um, I mean, I guess first we can touch on that Google deal, Google Windsurf deal. That deal was kind of crazy because I know OpenAI was trying to acquire Windsurf to kind of help with their coding platform. And I know from reports that employees at Windsurf, when that deal was announced, they were like going out and, looking at boats to buy and stuff like that because you know how startups work. You get a set salary, and then to get talent to actually come to the startup, they also offer equity. So depending on how much the company is sold for, the employees are given a certain amount of shares with a value of a certain amount. And so in hopes of when the company is bought, obviously they get a big chunk of money from that deal. So this deal is kind of interesting because before Cognition came out, the founders, kind of just screwed over their whole employee base, right? That's why I like to say a lot that startups are good for founders, but bad for hires. Because let's say you get a contract for $100,000 salary and then 400,000 in equity. If something like what Google just did, where they took the top talent but only licensed the product, didn't actually buy the whole company, then your 400,000, equity is kind of useless, right? So kind of crazy how that happens, where the founders were just like, okay, cool, peace, we're out of here. You
Yeah,
guys can
yeah.
go, deal with whatever you want and deal with whatever. I mean, and then obviously then Cognition came, and we don't know the full extent of that deal. Obviously, it's not going to be as lucrative as 3 billion or 2.3 billion, but yeah, that's just, that's crazy. And I mean, as we've seen with Meta's hiring and people making jokes about trading cards and putting these, developers' faces on and doing over and under on who would be taken from OpenAI
Yeah.
and who Meta would take. Yeah, I mean, I think that top AI talent is definitely more valuable than the product itself, because the talent is the one that actually built that product, right? They were the mind behind it, the people who came up with the strategy behind the actual product. So in general, you would think that they would essentially be able to, replicate that somewhere else, or increase or fix Google's products and things like that. So yeah, I do think that AI talent is definitely more valuable than the product itself. Because a lot of times, a lot of these products themselves in general are just wrappers of proprietary models like Cursor and Windsurf. Windsurf essentially was a AI powered IDE, or essentially integrated developer environment, where it allows, so an IDE in general is a tool that allows developers to kind of code and debug the code itself, and then run the cases, run the code to see what the code generates and stuff like that, and actually run the code locally. It's like a compiler built in and everything as a whole package. And then there's also, like, you can have, different plugins and stuff, like other coding languages built into it, stuff like that. So Windsurf and like Cursor was a AI powered IDE that essentially utilized a underlying coding model to help developers code, and it could understand the whole code base that's within that IDE. So yeah, I mean, for sure, AI talent is definitely better, and it's not like Windsurf was using a proprietary model. It was just a wrapper on top of other proprietary models. And so since Google has their own proprietary model, the people at Windsurf can just take their ideas and use Google's own proprietary model to create a similar product. So
Yeah, I wonder how that works because it sounds really complicated, like the IDE, the compiler. How does that, so what value does that give the consumer at the end of the day? What as if it's even given to a consumer, what products would a company be pumping out with something like this?
well, I mean, generally, an IDE is what all developers use, right?
Hmm.
I mean, not everybody's coding directly into a text editor. Basically, IDE is just a overpowered text editor that can actually understand the code that you're trying to write, and has like built-in things that can tell you, hey, you have a semicolon missing in your Java at the end
Oh,
of your
gotcha.
Java line, or I don't know, your indent is wrong for your Python code because Python is
Hmm.
based on indentation. So IDEs in general are for developers, but when it comes to things like Cursor and Windsurf, and this whole push towards vibe coding, now with AI built in, technically IDEs aren't necessarily just for developers now. You can technically have a, just regular person vibe coding in a AI powered IDE, and that IDE can help them code. Now, I'm not saying it'll be the best code or it'll be free from bugs or free from security, but I mean, these AI code helpers technically democratize development,
Hmm.
but obviously that doesn't stop the fact that people who are, if if you're not actually in development, you're not thinking about use case development, you're not thinking about security. I mean, if you go to Grubhub, or not Grubhub, thinking about food right now, Jesus, if you go to GitHub right now, and you just type in like OpenAI key, there's like hundreds of repositories where people have just deployed their uh, keys to
Oh,
GitHub and so that's a huge security risk, because now you're
yeah.
just losing money on your OpenAI key if somebody takes your key and starts using
Hmm.
it. So obviously I'm not saying vibe coding is the best for non-developers, but I mean this certainly democratizes developers for sure.
Yeah, so simply put, it kind of sounds like Windsurf Cognition. These companies are like a Grammarly of sorts. So like you're coding and they f correct your code. Is that like a good
Yeah,
understanding of it?
yeah. I mean, what I like to say is they help with like boilerplate code and code that it's seen before, right? But these coding models aren't like creating whole new algorithms and stuff like that, right? It's not using stuff that it hasn't already seen before because it's just using what it's trained on. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, these models don't actually reason and understand stuff. They just know pattern recognition and understand what you're trying to do and try to create code that best applies to your situation. But if you don't know anything about security or anything like that, or how to refactor code that the AI spits out, then you're probably going to have a problem. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, sure, there's these coding tools make it easier for non-developers to code a product, if you want to say.
Yeah, an IDE is
Interesting.
literally just a tool for any job. You've got a tool. The IDE is a developer's tool. So it's the platform that they use. And a lot of them, a lot of these text editors, I would say, when I was learning coding and things, you had more traditional coders that are using things like Notepad plus plus and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Love
And
Notepad++.
these IDEs,
Notepad plus plus.
no, no, Plat plus plus. These IDEs are like basically an evolved version of that, If you if you have some type of syntax error, um, then it'll like, put a little alert and tell you where the error is. It's just kind of things like that. And like you said, it's got a debug, you can do your debugging in it rather than having to do that externally and stuff like that. So IDE is literally just like in any job, you've got tools you use and that kind of guide you through your work. So I would just simplify it down to that for anybody that doesn't understand what an IDE is.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like it's also like a GitHub Copilot, something like that helps you out when you're coding. If you need help,
It really
just
depends. Like a lot of base ones are not that elaborate. I think that's kind of more where these companies are hopping in now
mhm.
and implementing more.
Yeah, so Microsoft's open source Visual Studio Code is what a lot of developers like to use. Now, Cursor was basically just a wrapper around Visual Studio Code with AI built in. So it could, look at your whole code base and say like, hey, there's an error here. Here's where I would suggest pasting this code or whatever. Now, when it comes to like a general IDE wouldn't tell you what code to write. It'll just
Hmm.
understand that in the context of your code, it won't compile correctly because there's a semicolon missing or there's an indentation missing within your Python code. It's not going to tell you what code to fix. It's just going to say like, hey, in this line there's an error and the compiler is hitting an error here. You should probably look at this line.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah.
Okay.
now
And when he
with
says
like,
wrapper, I feel like it's just to simplify that. A wrapper is basically, in this case, like I would say kind of like an upgrade that they've developed. And when you say wrapper, it's kind of saying, it's that upgrade itself that is still a part of. So like Visual Studio Code, if that's your coding platform, now they've developed something that can be implemented with that just kind of leverages AI to upgrade like its capabilities. So that's what he means by wrapper. It's just on
Okay,
simple,
cool.
simple, simple terms.
Interesting. So do you guys think with these massive exits that these companies are having like Windsurf, where their leadership just up and went due to deep pockets of these companies like Google and all these tech companies, do you think these deals are ethical because they give other people within the company uncertainty when it comes to job security, or is it more of like there should be other people that step in, like Cognition, to help employ these people that are facing job insecurity? What do you guys
Yeah, I think
think?
I think it's I don't know how you would look at it ethically, but I will say when it comes to, companies like Google coming in and instead of trying to pay the larger amount to do a full acquisition, they're basically just luring the uh, what you want to really say there, but they're luring the initial leaders and founders out and taking them instead of trying to acquire the entire company because they're saying, well, we've got a model that we like enough. We just need people to help with strategy and growth and developing on top of that. So they don't feel like we need to acquire a company with all its employees and then all the costs it takes to go along with an acquisition, right? We don't need all that. We're just gonna say, I like you and I like you and I like you. I'll pay you twice what you're making there. And they're just kind of hoping that they take it. And so they're really just going in and taking the heads off of these startups. And yeah, I think it definitely, first off, it's going to discourage people from wanting to go to work for startups. So it is hurting people's ability to get startups off the ground in the future, I think. And I think there's not really a way to stop it. People like, companies like Google, they're going to want to stay, Google's at the forefront of where do you all go to search for information? We all go Google 90% of the time. Most people, their first thing is, I'm going to Google it, not I'm going to Bing it or I'm going to, whatever. So when they're doing stuff like this, it's because they want to stay at the forefront of what tools you're using, where you're going for information, and so on. Um, and I think at the end of the day, you got to kind of give them credit for the strategy. Like, yeah, it's smart, right? Who wants to pay $1 billion in a full acquisition when you could just, maybe drop 2 million,
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
but
from
yeah, ethically, I don't know how you would really go into that because I do think it really sucks for people that are within the company that are building the things. And the way Google looks at it is, well, we have people that can build, like these people can build, no problem. But we need the people with the strategy and the brains that have developed that have like designed this, right? So they're just coming and saying, we don't need you guys. Even if you're good at your job, even if you're good at building, they don't really need you. So I definitely think that's a tough place to be in because these people lose their jobs kind of out of nowhere. You don't know what kind of severances they get, if anything, with something like a startup. So yeah, I'm not sure the extent of how Cognition Labs is involved with this or what their intentions are. So maybe it'll help compensate a little bit, but I definitely think companies like Google, they're just saying, forget it, we're gonna go in and we're gonna nitpick people out.
yeah, from a purely business perspective, I don't know if we can really attach ethics to this, but from a purely business perspective, I mean, this was a great deal by Google, right? They so OpenAI was offering, 2.3 or 3 billion, right? And then Google was like, I don't know if we want to give the full 3 billion. Let's save 700 million and then let's poach the top people in the company, the CEO, the co-founder, and then some senior developers. And then let's license what we can license from Windsurf. And then, down the line, we can just end our license and then copy whatever the functionality is in Windsurf currently. And so now we don't, now not only did we save 700 million, now we have that functionality built into our own system. Now people don't need to go to Windsurf anymore. And then not only that, now they don't need to pay salaries of the additional 250 employees that Cognition took over. Now they're saving another couple $1 million, right? Or so, in terms of overhead, where now they can take that money and put it back into their own company, right? So I think, while I don't necessarily, I don't know if it's agree. I guess that's just the startup model in general, where I know all these guys were kind of screwed out of their equity in general. I mean, we don't know the extent of what Cognition's deal is right now, but yeah, I mean,
It's
yeah.
interesting though, because Google says, okay, well, we're going to license your technology and basically, like you said, poach these higher ranked individuals.
Hmm.
But Cognition was like, okay, well, you cut the head off the dragon. We're gonna take the rest of the dragon. We're gonna take the product, the platform, the brand, all of that, all the remaining staff. And I'm curious, since they're a smaller company, I'm curious how the what the impact will be there.
So looks like with all this stuff going on, there's a lot of questions. We just got to see how it unravels at the end of the day. Moving on, this next article, um, OpenAI's their open model is still delayed. They were supposed to release the model, I think, in sometime in the summer, but then that got delayed. OpenAI is known for championing transparency and accessibility in AI. That's what they were known for. And they pushed back the release of their open source model, citing safety concerns, which we kind of talked about previously. And it makes sense why there's a lot. It feels like there's a lot of checking that they have to do just to make sure that everything is good before they go live. And so critics argue that the delay aligns more with commercial strategy than caution, but there are both sides of the dime, especially as competitors race ahead with their own offerings. And so repeated delays have sparked debate about OpenAI and their philosophy in general, as well as some see a shift from a mission-driven transparency to profit-driven gatekeeping. So, my question is, are these safety concerns a valid reason to withhold open models, from your guys' experience, or are they just being used to maintain a competitive advantage? What do you guys think?
Um, I don't think it has anything to do with safety concerns, if I'm being honest.
Really?
I mean, Kimmy K2, which I think
That's the
is
moonshot one, right?
yeah, from Moonshot AI.
Mhm.
They just which is backed by, I believe, Alibaba. Essentially, the they came out with benchmarks and they were saying that this open source model was like better than Open AI 4.1 and Claude Code in terms of coding and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't think it's a safety concern. I think it's more of, these other companies can make these amazing open source models, but ours kind of sucks. So I don't think we should, we should, you know, kind of deploy it. Because if their open source models are beating our proprietary models, obviously we don't want our open source model to be as good as our proprietary models anyways, because we want to keep making money.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't think it was a safety concern.
I think
I
OpenAI is
see.
weird
I
about
see.
this from the jump, man. They when they were first getting off the ground, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna be open source AI building, like we're uh, massively innovating, building out this completely new thing." They got tons of investments from all kinds. I mean, I know Elon Musk is infamous for being the most angry about it based on his like donation to this because it was supposed to be an open nonprofit thing, and then they were like, you know how we said all these things about like taking your money and making it open for everybody. Actually, we're not doing that. We're gonna go ahead and sell and make billions and not be open at all and also keep all of y'all's money. So thank you. And also the money you gave us doesn't actually give you any stake in our company because it was all donations. So I think like that's the biggest thing with OpenAI, like from the get-go here. They've been really shady about stuff like that. Um, and I think people are more quick to, back OpenAI because it's this new company to the tech space and it's not one of these established tech giants and blah blah blah. But if you look at like that type of thing, that's just incredibly shady. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs and details, so I may be wrong on things there and in certain situations, but from my knowledge, I think yeah, they've been putting off this whole open part for a long time, and I feel almost like they're trying to put it off to a point where they just cancel it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they're just trying to put it off until they can find a reason to be like, actually, we feel like that's not a good idea. A part of me even believes that they're gonna try to get, you know, as much money as they can out of being kind of built on, because all these companies are building all kinds of stuff off of it. Uh, and I think that once they feel like they've reached a certain point, then they won't feel bad being like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. We've transitioned into something completely different now. I don't think it'd be out of their brand at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we know that even they don't think that they'll continually keep making money with kind of just models, right? We've seen recently that they've come out with, these big enterprise consulting deals where if you make like $10 million plus money, like we will consult on how we can actually integrate our models into your business and stuff like that, where now they're actually creating consulting opportunities rather than just creating models. And that just kind of just indicates how they think that they're not going to be able to keep making a sustained amount of money just by releasing these models.
Which is
And
fair.
how they continually creating new products, like tr buying that device maker, et cetera, et cetera. So, um, you know, they um, they know that they're not going to make enough money from this. So, um, I don't think they want to lose any more money than they are right now. So I don't think they're going to release a good open source model anytime soon. I mean, even Altman said indefinitely, whatever that means.
Yeah,
Yeah,
indefinitely.
so it sounds like
Not anytime soon, and only if. It's like when people are suspended indefinitely for things. It's like, you're suspended for a very long time.
yeah. Yeah, I guess I mean it makes sense. Like they see all these other models like moonshots, KDK2, whatever it was. They see it 1 trillion parameters that's vastly larger than the OpenAI's models and what they're running in terms of parameters, and they see all this competition, and I guess it would make sense for them to hold off in that regard so that they don't lose some sort of competitive edge that they might have. And by opening their model or by, having it everybody like just be able to use it, I mean, they could potentially lose that advantage, and that makes sense. So where do we draw the line between responsible release and anti-competitive behavior? Do you think that there should be a fine line between those two things?
I think it's not even at this point. I think they're not really puppy guarding anything because, we're talking about talent and stuff like that. There's lots of talent coming through, various learning opportunities and pipelines and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say that they're like puppy guarding any type of transformative technology. I think the bigger issue here is that they're claiming they're going to be one thing or do one thing, and then they've been doing the other. And I think it's smart for them to expand their business model. I think at the end of the day, they are still one of the leaders, obviously, in this market. And I don't see them going anywhere anytime soon. And I'm sure they'll develop more and more. And if they get into danger, I'm sure they'll just like be happy to take an acquisition somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised, but it is very smart of them to say, oh, well, we'll do consulting, we'll do this or we'll do that. I think that a lot of companies they expand, products, business lines, things of that nature. So I'm not surprised that they're looking into that. I think they'll make lots of money off of a consulting line of business. At the end of the day, that it can be so complex and as you get down the rabbit hole of how building out these different stacks and things like that works, I think so many companies that want to implement these things just don't know how, they don't understand it, and so they would be happy to have some level of consulting. So I do think they're probably seeing that open market and they're going to capitalize on it. And if they run it properly, I think it'll be a massive line. And I think you'll probably see a lot of consulting firms start building out some level of AI development consulting type of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I
Um,
wonder if there should be like, obviously capitalism leads the way to a lot of things that the laws, I don't know, I feel like there should be a software company or just an AI model that is specifically treated more like public infrastructure instead of something that is for profit. Because how are people to learn the foundations of what AI is without first having like, I guess, like some sort of public like database of some sort where people can learn about these models instead of everything being for profit. And I
Yeah.
guess Anthropic was kind of doing that at first, but then it got bought out by Google. And then now it seems like they've switched up in that regard. But I just wonder what your
Yeah.
guys' thoughts are.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think that's super applicable because I mean, if somebody wants to go in and learn about any of this stuff, they can. And most of the time, only really deep level developers are wanting to go in and even try to understand how the models are operating on the back end. And I don't think that,
not necessarily. I mean, if people want to go look at models, right? I mean, what you're saying, Aiden, that's what open source is, right?
Yeah.
It's democratizing the ability to utilize these softwares that, people might not have enough money to pay for, and now they can use these good open source models that, or even open source technology, right? Even open source software, stuff like Apache Open Office or whatever. I don't know if it's Apache, but Open Office is a decent alternative to Microsoft Word where you have to pay for Word. But if somebody wants to learn about these models and just AI in general, that's what Hugging Face is, right? It's just a community of developers and lovers of AI where they can go there and use transformer models for free and you download these open source models and that's where all these like Chinese companies and American companies and European companies are uploading their open source models and people are then training these open source models and then deploying their own versions on Hugging Face that other people can download. So I mean the open source ecosystem is out there. But yeah, just want to clarify that's out there. But yeah, Chris, continue. Sorry.
yeah, no, I'm just kind of saying that I don't think an open source software type things have always existed as far as the since internet's been established and these softwares are established. Whenever I first got into college, I was actually doing a lot of CAD work, and I had never, I couldn't afford CAD itself, and I was going to community college, so they only provided it in the school. So if you wanted to work on stuff at home, uh, you had to really leverage a different software. And so I used open source CAD software, and then like you said, there's open source for basically anything, honestly. So I don't think it's really a question of, cornering the market or not allowing it to be democratized. I think at the end of the day, there's always going to be multiple companies in this kind of world until, you get probably 20 years down the line, you'll start seeing maybe these bigger companies keep buying out more and more things. But I do think this like AI world is enabling a lot more opportunities for other companies to step in. It's not like the kind of world we're used to of, there's three search. I think that this is going to have there's going to be a lot more possibilities, a lot more tools. Things are going to be, they're not the way AI, these models are and stuff like that. It's not like a single product that you can use. Like ChatGPT, we can go to ChatGPT. and we can use it to look stuff up, check stuff, whatever, talk up to it or whatever, right? But A, they're not the only thing you can go to. B, there are plenty of varieties of, AI, whatever you want to, however deep you want to get into that, um, that are free tools that you can use, and AI means all kinds of different things. It doesn't have to be these crazy, massive, large language models that are doing all these different things and agentic stuff. Um, AI is on a much larger scale. So I don't think there's any fear of, like capitalism leading to some sort of, like oligopoly or something like that. I think ultimately we'll be fine because so many different people, like you said with Hugging Face, so many people can develop different things. It's kind of more of a situation of, do you choose to use one of the more established ones, or do you want to go and use something that is free? Um, and I see what you're saying on like maybe they're not as good, but at the like, if you use the free ChatGPT, you're not gonna get as much access or maybe as good stuff as if you pay, the monthly fee or whatever. So I kind of see what you're saying there. Maybe there'll be a gap in performance and stuff, but I do think as I'm sure we'll see, more growth in the open source space and AI than we've seen with even typical, open source softwares.
I mean, I think the big issue is, and I know there was a big issue with when the Nintendo Switch came out. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but
Oh yeah.
when it comes to, open source, you actually own that model right now. You download the model and you have it locally. You physically have a copy of that model and you own it. But with things like ChatGPT, Gemini, I mean, even Gemini has its open source model. But I don't know, Grok, Claude, whatever, you don't actually own those models. So let's say the company goes out of business and all your company is integrated into these open source models. Now you're just, excuse my language, but you're fucked.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do, right? So, so, and that's like one of the big issues when it came with things like Nintendo Switch, where in their like conditions, it said if you do any modifications to our Nintendo Switch 2, we will remotely deactivate your Switch. And people were like, yo, I bought this device. Now it's mine. I own it. And then Switch was like, no, in our bylaws, if you read it, you bought the device, it says exactly this. And so people were like, this is ridiculous. And now the actual cartridges in games aren't the actual physical copy of the game.
No.
What
Yeah.
they are keys to unlock the digital download of the game. So people are paying, $30 more for a physical cartridge that isn't actually the game. So what's the point of buying the physical cartridge if it's just the key to unlock the online download? You can just go to the online download now, right?
Hmm.
Well, that's how
So
all of these games are now.
I mean,
yeah,
yeah, you
like
see a lot of these websites now that they just offer the keys that you
yeah.
could just straight up buy the key for cheaper online and have access to the game.
Just
I
get a
guess
code. Yeah.
it's just yeah, like there's just a shift in physical products to more digital products, and I wonder what that's going to be like in the future. I mean, it sounds kind of like who knows kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. So like I said, with a local model, let's a good enough local model. I mean that Kimi K2 has great, benchmarks, etc. Other models are great, like the Microsoft's Chinafied version of DeepSeek
China,
R1,
but
where they basically got rid of all of the censoring in that model. That I mean, those models are great. Like you can take that model, integrate it into your services, have buy a, instead of dealing with all this cloud computing, because the more you scale cloud computing, the more expensive it is. All you do is, get your own server, deploy the model to that server, integrate it into whatever you need to, and then allow people to remotely access that server and use your open source model. And now, if ChatGPT or Claude go out of business, it's not going to affect your model because you own that model. You're running it locally.
No.
And that's why you see this skill being so valuable now because I've heard something similar with like Ollama, right? You can
Hmm.
basically create your own, you know, if you're a company, you see companies that have intranets and stuff like that. I mean, you can build a model now just specific to your company. None of that data is um it can't be scraped, it can't like it's not public knowledge, nobody can view it, it's only internal. So they need people with the skills to be able to develop stuff like that. And then you start getting into, oh, well, we can build a model for internal use specific to this. Oh, maybe specific to this, etc. So that is where you'll see like the skill, the value of these skilled employees is exactly that. You want their people more and more wanting to shift away from that. So
Yeah, I mean, I think like open source is basically just like the reason why I think that stuff like free open libraries should be a thing because you're democratizing the access to information, right? So somebody who might not have the money to, buy books or access the internet can now go to a library and access this information for free. Same thing as like open source models. You're democratizing the ability for anybody and everybody to have access to these services. So
yeah.
Yeah, we should it'd be cool. We should do an episode where we build our own local model. That'd be cool. I know you showed
we
me
could,
Sahib a little bit.
yeah,
That'd be cool. Maybe like, I don't know, like another week or something. We could talk about it more. But
yeah,
it's just super interesting, like especially now, to have your own local model of your own chatbot would be super helpful and just in case like the internet goes down or something.
deep sick.
So I actually
Yeah,
saw
you
something really cool that someone
go.
did. They leveraged I think it was they leveraged Olama to basically kind of develop their own local model that they pumped all of their homework for all these different courses over the years that they were taking for college. And that way they could literally go in and say, you know, like I'm trying to find information on this thing because, you know, sometimes when you learn something 2 years ago, you maybe forget the details, but then
Yeah.
it's inevitable. You're going to take a college course that then you have to reference back and have that knowledge from previous course. And I feel like we've all maybe been in a situation where we're like, shit, I don't remember exactly what it was, right? So they literally would just go in and be like, this is the thing I'm learning now. I remember taking this class where I did these things. What was it that I did and how can I improve on it, right? So
Yeah,
that
that's
that's
super
like a
helpful.
really unique use case, but think of all you can do um especially with some of these open source where they literally provide guides and things like that on what to do to develop your own stuff. So, you know, like
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever launched Photoshop, right? Photoshop or anything on that Adobe, platform.
Yeah.
Whenever you open it, they actually have tutorial videos and things that can help you get off the ground and do your own work. So, I think a combination of what they provide for you and then maybe doing a little bit of Googling or YouTubing, anybody could realistically develop their own for whatever use case you want, right? So,
Yeah. Super interesting. Well, that being said, you can't have a model without scraping. And so now Cloudflare is saying no to AI scraping when it comes to training your models in general. It's paramount. I mean, you need the internet. And I don't know if you guys remember Cloudflare, but they're one of the largest internet infrastructure providers. They usually have that like when you go on a website or something or like you need authorization, you click the checkbox and they
Yep,
usually it says
I'm human.
Cloudflare. Yeah, I'm human. They so that's them. So they're implementing controls now to stop AI companies from actually scraping websites that are hosted on its network unless explicit consent is given. So this move could shift the balance of power between content owners and the AI trainers themselves. So this is a huge move, as you guys can imagine, and could mark the start of a broader AI data rights movement for the future. My question is, should websites have the right to opt out of being used to train AI models? If so, how would those rights be enforced across the web? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think 100% that should be the case. I mean, all these people like Google and ChatGPT, OpenAI, and Claude have essentially gotten free reign to all of this data, right? And where they're making millions and millions and millions and upon billions of dollars on this, data that they essentially scraped with and trained their model for essentially free, right? They didn't pay any money to get this information. So to then be able to shift the ownership of that information, right, to the actual creators of that information, I think that's great. I don't think ethically that it's sound that the people who actually created the data are not given the any compensation for training this, AI model, right? And I think that allowing users to, when they get a, hosting deal from Cloudflare, to then be able to be like, hey, you can scrape my website, but for every scrape, kind of like a per scrape model, for every scrape, you give me $2. I don't think that that's a bad deal. I mean, if I mean, even right now, I've seen countless articles where people have been saying that the amount of traffic that they've gotten on their website has made the amount of load on their website go up, where now they're having to pay for companies to scrape their own data, where they're having to
Hmm.
pay the hosting services because the hosting services has to take the load of all these scrapes, all these AI scrapers, right?
Yeah.
And so all that cost is being put onto the people who actually created the website, but that's not fair because they're not getting any money from those scrapes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's definitely a great thing. This
Hmm.
would lower that impact, right? And then the people would actually get money from those scrapes. So I think it's a good model, and I think the model should be a pay per scrape model.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Definitely see the perspective there. I just wonder that they're like the websites that kind of aggregate a bunch of, for example, like there's this website that I use called Trading Economics. They have a bunch of just financial data that helps me keep up to date with like whatever GDP growth or unemployment rate, all that stuff. And
Hmm.
they scrape their data from like .gov sites. So I wonder if maybe there should be some websites that are abstained from this kind of fee because they're public with public use, I guess. But I wonder, I just how it would just it be enforced in general. Like I wonder, I definitely agree that these websites that are trying to make a living like with what they're trying to do and they have good data, but these AI scrapers are then, making them spend more money on their costs in terms of like the load that it takes from them, and they're gonna have to end up paying for that. That makes sense. But I just wonder how they are gonna enforce the rights, I guess.
I
Well, I
think
mean, it's
because they
it's
give
it's
the option,
technology.
right?
Yeah.
They whenever they sign up for it, if they are a public facing site, if it is public information, I think because Cloudflare, when they're creating the new domain, they're saying, "Hey, do you want to be available for the scraping? Yes, no. If yes, then do you wish to charge a fee whenever your site is scraped?"
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
I do think if you're maybe into the public, open information type thing, it does become because I don't know how these AI companies are going to approach this because if they're charged for every time a site is scraped, are they going to prioritize sites that they don't have to pay money to scrape? And in that case, is that going to affect the accuracy of these models even more than they already have issues with hallucinations. If these companies decide, well, why would I pay X amount of money every single time somebody happens to ask a question that goes to your site? You know, I could just use this other site. And then you come to this question of reliability. Um, I know they provide links to the sites, but if I have a blog, right, and I put a post out that's information that, like for me, right? I'll look at blog posts where people have posted, the solutions to an issue that I'm facing, right? And that person sees the traction, they get credit for that, and so on. But whenever I ask ChatGPT the same question and it just has scraped that article, that answers my question, right? But they don't get any data from that. They don't know, they don't get the traction data and so on. So then it becomes there's just so many questions because yes, that's a reliable source. I know that source is reliable and I can go through step by step, right? So then it becomes, well, are they gonna not prioritize this site, this person's blog, because they're requesting you to pay them every time? So
Well, I mean, they can still, access the website, right? It just now they're not allowing the bot to be, trained on that model, on that information. Now, when a bot accesses that information, it gives links if it goes to a website. Now it's actually allowing like real users to go to that website. And then if there's any other products or services or information that the person wants, and it's like a pay for thing, now people can go and actually pay for that stuff, and that generates money for the person that actually provided the information to the LLM, right?
Hmm.
So I think it definitely democratizes it where sure LLMs can still do the searching and actually go to the website where it's not actually scraping information and putting it to their model and acting like it's its own information. Now they're actually providing links to the actual website, and that might generate more income for the person that actually created that information. So I don't think that'll make these AI bots block or these companies block that information. They just won't be able to actually train the model on that information. And
I
I think
definitely like it.
that's, huh?
I definitely like it. I I think
Yeah.
that's something that everybody's agreed on is kind of the free reign access has been kind of ridiculous. Especially you think of companies like Google that, they have access to everything on their platform and they prioritize things. They already have models for that and stuff. So they
Yeah.
pretty
I
much
mean,
are like, I mean, it takes them nothing to scrape all of that.
yeah, I mean, and in terms of how you would block something like that, I mean, you already have something like robot.txt, which is embedded into a website, which tells agents and bots what information they can and cannot scrape. But obviously, there are scrapers that, ignore that. So what you can also do is you can implement rate limiting. So if you see a specific IP address or a specific session where something is rapidly accessing pages on this website, then the service like Cloudflare knows like, hey, this seems like a bot. Let me, rate limit it and prevent it from, accessing this website at that speed, stuff like that. And there are other ways that they can do it, but there are definitely ways for you to limit the access of the LLMs. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it sounds like it's a good thing. It sounds like, companies, these websites are getting paid for offering what the good data that they have. And
I mean, it's ethical and good for us, but
yeah,
you know,
mm,
these higher up companies, they were trying
right.
to lobby Congress to, say like, hey, we need all this data. If we don't have all this data, then we're going to lose the AI race to China and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
they would rather say screw the ethics and be like, hey, let us do it. So
Yeah, for sure.
We can't leave to China.
So moving on to the next article, Elon Musk. We all know that guy. He's doing a $2 billion bet on XAI. From the article, it seems like he uses his companies to kind of help each other, and that's what he's known for. Well, not known for, but that's one of the things that he does. He's known for a lot of things, as you guys probably already know. But reports suggest that Elon Musk is planning to pour $2 billion into his AI startup XAI via SpaceX. The goal is to build a powerful foundational model to rival OpenAI, one that tightly integrates with Tesla X and Starlink. And so it seems like Musk is consolidating power across verticals, Starlink, X, and Tesla. And it seems like it could usher in a vertically integrated AI ecosystem built for specific ideological or commercial ends. So the question here is, what are the risks and rewards of foundational models being built and owned by billionaires such as Elon Musk?
Well, I think this is an interesting one because, XAI can be leveraged in a lot of different ways, but he's, if you think about this, I think it's going to grow the value of Tesla, to be honest. And I think same thing with any of these companies, right? They've got Neuralink, Starship, all of these things, or SpaceX rather. Uh,
Starship.
Starship, yeah, that's their new one. It's actually pretty sick. But
Cool.
SpaceX, AI is. I don't know how familiar you are with the self-driving and all this stuff they're doing, but I'm sure they'll take what they've learned on the neural net and stuff like that from there and implement it. They've got their Tesla bots and things, and I think you think of like Apple, they have their whole platform, everything seamlessly integrates, and it honestly makes things so much nicer a lot of the time. The Apple environment is one of the biggest selling points for their products. Um, and I think when it comes to Tesla or all these companies being able to seamlessly integrate all the information that they learn, right? I think it's going to provide a lot of value for these companies. And then of course the XAI, the model itself being leveraged in similar ways that OpenAI is leveraged. I think it's definitely going to be valuable in a lot of different ways. And honestly, $2 billion, I know it sounds like a crazy amount of money, but in comparison to how much money you see being put towards some of these other companies that are only going to developing AI models, like $2 billion to be able to seamlessly integrate this through five different companies, give or take, versus and have that same thing that they're doing with ChatGPT and all these other platforms. I think $2 billion is honestly nothing, which is
Yeah.
weird. But
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
I mean this it could lead. We already have monopolies, right? Gemini buying, all these Windsurf and kind of, taking all these startups and combining it into itself. Same with OpenAI buying all these like device manufacturing things and trying to buy Windsurf and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's already people, trying to trying to create monopolies, even though we have things in place to kind of, have anti-monopoly things, but money runs the world and all these people donate to our politicians' pockets and stuff like that. So, we're not going to have any big ramifications for these companies, and they're just going to keep growing bigger and bigger. So, um, yeah, I mean,
soft
of course there
monopoly.
are.
That's what they
Yeah,
are. Because Samsung and Apple basically own the smartphone segment, right?
yep,
And then
yep.
you think of like Google basically owns the search engine segment. So like there's soft monopolies where 98% of people use this product and they know that, but it's not technically a monopoly because there's five other companies that do it, you know?
Yeah, technically. But yeah, I mean, so there's definitely risks. Um, I don't know about rewards. I mean, I guess the reward is being able to use the stuff if you have money and have access to it. But
Mhm.
I mean, that's why I'm still a big proponent of open source and democratizing the ability for users to be able to use these different types of softwares and without having to dish out all this money and stuff like that. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be able to pay for Claude, Gemini, even this new model called Manus, and I'm spending like I don't know, $120 a month on these AI tools because I love AI, but somebody else who might not have the ability to spend this much, who also loves AI might not have access to that. So these open source models and open source software really allows the ability to democratize these access to these models and softwares and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, definitely a double-edged sword for sure. There's many risks. Like I said, if that company for some reason goes belly up and it has a monopoly on something, and then everybody in the world is screwed. Um, but then I guess the reward is being able to use the model. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a weird thing because like anything in you're looking at cloud or technology just in general, at the end of the day, it kind of the topic of this whole video, right? Who can have that skill? Because what makes Google so great is their strategy team. That's who's running acquisitions, right? Strategy team. Obviously, more than that, but then you have the team that's actually developing and building this. But if you have the people that are able to, they have the most extensive knowledge and act, you then give them access to greater resources, things, companies like Google are able to draw those people in because if it's you and I, right? If I have the skills and the knowledge to do something, and a smaller company wants to offer me, 100 grand to do the same thing where Google's offering me 500 grand for, where are you gonna go? You're
Right.
gonna go to because less risky because Google's a billion-dollar business, so it's most likely not collapsing anytime soon. And B, the resources you have access to, if you just have on your LinkedIn profile, I was a developer at Google versus I was a
Oh
developer
yeah.
at this smaller company. I mean, these
Yeah.
companies, that's how they're so successful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, And I
Fang.
think that with technology in general, that's just how it is. I mean, if you think about it, the industry is still in its infancy, right? I mean, you think of like your parents or your grandparents, they barely know what a smartphone is, depending on how old they are, of course. But um, I think we're just kind of getting into this world where people are learning code or learning technology at earlier ages. Um, so I think it's going to be an interesting future to see. Um, but it's definitely down to skills and knowledge. So.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
For sure, indeed. Well, with that being said, thanks for tuning in to Tech for Thought. This week proves that AI isn't just about tech, it's about who holds the keys, as we've seen through this conversation. Talent, data, capital, control. They're not trends. It seems like they're more shifts. And so happy to dissect it with you guys. Check out our link tree for all our socials, links, all that good stuff we have in the link tree. Also, you have the ability to support the show if you so please. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for everything.
Thanks, guys. Great show.